Slavery was a part of life in all 13 original American colonies. In a population of 2.5 million, 20%, 500,000, were held in slavery. In 1792, a year after Vermont became a state, and 15 years after its constitution became the first in North America to ban slavery, the Robinsons, who were Quakers, left Newport, Rhode Island and settled at Rokeby in Vermont. A year later, when the cotton gin was invented, the cotton boom began in the southern states, geometrically exploding the crop's production, creating a surge in demand for slave labor to produce it. So that by the Civil War in the 15 southern slave states, 5 million were enslaved out of America's population of 31 million, owned by less than 1% of that population.
The antebellum period for historians is the period between the formation of the American government and the beginning of the Civil War. It's really when America becomes itself.
And that time period is the height of slavery in the United States.
Owning and operating mills in Vermont, Thomas Robinson was one of the first in the state to embrace merino sheep farming. The Robinsons sent their son, Rowland Thomas Robinson, to the Quakers' 9 Partners boarding school in Dutchess County, New York. There, Rowland met Rachel Gippon. The two married in 1820 and returned to Rokeby to tend the family sheep farm and mills. But they found their true calling in opposing slavery.
Quakers, they learned about slavery being an abomination, immoral. They were steeped in equality and freedom.
From very early on, the Quakers, as a religious group, were committed to anti-slavery activity.
The Robinsons were early subscribers to the anti-slavery newspaper, The Liberator, and as a result of their anti-slavery work, came to know its publisher, William Lloyd Garrison. Rowland's writing was carried in the paper.
It becomes the leading anti-slavery newspaper in the United States. People subscribe to it all across the North. Rowland supports Garrison's activities.
Garrison stayed at Rokeby, I believe. They were friends.
The American Anti-Slavery Society, founded in 1833, was under the leadership of Garrison, and Rowland served as its vice president on and off for more than 5 years, and helped create the Vermont and Ferrisburgh anti-slavery societies.
Free Black Americans in the North are joining these anti-slavery societies.
I found a newspaper article that had lists of people who donated to the Anti-Slavery Society. All the black farmers in Lincoln Hill and Heinsberg, both the Clark family and the Peters family, all donating to the Anti-Slavery Society.
By the mid-1830s, a more strident group, the abolitionists, evolves and calls for the abolishment of slavery. Within the abolitionist movement, there are 2 groups: the gradualists, who advocate for slavery to be eased out over a generation, and then the more radical group that are pushing for the immediate end to all slavery.
The Robinsons were definitely radical because they believed in immediate emancipation and equality between black and white people.
And it's rooted in the Robinsons' Quaker faith.
The anti-slavery movement was much more popular than abolitionists.
Fewer than 10% of the people who are anti-slavery are people who are calling for the immediate end of slavery rather than the eventual end of slavery.
After 1830, when abolitionism really takes off, you have a shift towards Frederick Douglass, who in 1845 says not, "I am human," but "I am someone." And that assertion of an individual identity, which of course presupposes equality with the audience, is part of what makes him so threatening. Tremendous resistance from the general populace to the abolitionist movement.
And people who are advocating against slavery are attacked. There's a newspaper publisher, Lovejoy in Ohio.
Mobs broke into his printing office and destroyed the press, threw it in the river. Each time that they did that, the first 3 times, he set up shop again. The 4th time, they killed him. Garrison was beaten within an inch of his life more than once. There's one famous story about him being caught by a mob, and they threw a rope around his neck and dragged him through the streets. They were going to hang him. It's almost like terrorism is how I would describe it in terms of the effort of these mobs to repress this political movement that they found threatening. Whatever
sort of danger that activists are putting themselves in, it doesn't match up to the same level of danger that the freedom seekers are encountering.
Trust, danger, risk, hope, and defiance. These are all the things that sort of wrapped up into that whole, not only the abolitionist movement, but the actual Underground Railroad.
The Underground Railroad was a secret way that people escaped from bondage.
This covert network of routes and safe houses that were established all throughout the United States.
When Africans were forcibly brought to the United States, there was always an effort to be free. And those which managed to be removed from the bonds of plantation owners, they moved northward. They followed the North Star.
Basically, people were escaping to the northern free states or Canada, or going south into Mexico. They were going wherever it was that they could enjoy freedom.
Dare we even speak to Black history?
A story comes to mind is the story of Frederick Douglass. He actually escaped from the state of Maryland. So he disguised himself up as a sailor, escaped by train, and lands in New York.
Frederick Douglass, when he becomes free, plays a really important role in the Underground Railroad.
The Robinsons are right in the center of this movement, right? I mean, they had a lot of dignitaries here in this house.
Someone like Harriet Tubman, of course, ferrying people from the South into freedom and then going back into the South. A lot of the conductors on the Underground Railroad are free Black Northerners. Two of the most famous examples are David Ruggles in New York and William Still in Philadelphia. Especially William Still, he keeps a journal about the people who are passing through.
I'm sure there were a lot of African Americans who were helping people when they could, but it just hasn't been documented. Jane Hawley and her sons, James and Joseph, were shoemakers in Burlington. They were documented as being on the Underground Railroad.
The saga of the Underground Railroad really reminds us of the enduring importance, not only of justice, but the strength that is required to stand against oppression.
The correspondence preserved at Rokeby by the Robinson family provides a unique record of freedom seekers who came and worked at or simply passed through the farm. Jesse was a self-emancipated Black man working for wages at Rokeby. On his behalf, Rowland wrote Jesse's owner in North Carolina, explaining, "By his industry and economy laid up $150, and he is willing to give the whole sum for his freedom." In another example, Oliver Johnson, a Vermonter who was a national abolition activist, advocate for freedom seeker Simon, "It is a long way to your residence. I hope he will arrive in safety and prove to be an honest, faithful laborer." We don't know if the freedom seeker Simon traveled the 600 miles to Rokeby and earned their fair wages for his honest labor.
The moment of receiving payment for one's labor was a key part of the process of self-emancipating, of becoming free. Frederick Douglass talks about it in his autobiography. He talks about receiving wages actually for the first time.
I look at the Rokeby sheep farm as really a sort of a landscape of resistance, being staunch abolitionists, morally wanting to end slavery, but really aiding and assisting and allowing people like, Jesse and Simon escape to freedom, gain manumission, unencumbered, by the chains of slavery.
We're in the Rokeby family house.
The fact that this house is here and all the documents are here is just incredible. I don't know any other place that's like this place.
In the sense of people fleeing for their lives, having found a respite here at Rokeby.
Places like Rokeby, where the anti-slavery cause, the Underground Railroad cause, is the precursor to the modern day interracial civil rights movement. It's truly an American story. Being a national historic landmark, we're able to understand the significance, the landscape, the structure that farm, that 90-acre farm, played in sort of the creation of the United States.